Okay, so we are live again. Okay. Well then, I do apologise very much to everyone out there. We had some problems with the audio there, so we will just start again. Good evening. My name is Kenny McBride, here for Scotland at 7 on Broadcasting Scotland on the day that Parliament returned after the prorogation that never was. Boris Johnson has just sat down very shortly before we came on air. But today we first heard from Attorney General Geoffrey Cox, who said that the government would comply with the law, and also claimed that Parliament was a dead Parliament that should no longer sit, because the Parliament should have the courage to face the electorate. Boris Johnson reiterated that message in his own speech, basically daring Jeremy Corbyn to hold a no-confidence vote, which he did say would get government time tomorrow if Corbyn was willing to bring such a vote forward. Clearly, of course, we know the opposition parties don't want to do that until they can be absolutely certain that a no-deal Brexit is out of the question. And now I would like to introduce our guest. Lizzie Eldridge is joining us. Lizzie is a journalist based in Malta. And Lizzie, are you there?
I am. Evening.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So, Lizzie, tell us, first of all, what's the reaction in Malta from the government, from the media, and from just the people round about you to this whole Brexit buruk that we've been going through for 3 years now, but especially the most recent events?
Okay, well, a lot of Maltese media is in Maltese, so obviously I'm excluded from watching that, and that most of the media in Malta is also owned and controlled by the government, but it's in Maltese, so I'm excluded from watching that. In terms of what I do know, in terms of what I see and read and what I hear from other people, I mean, people look on from Malta, and I'm talking Maltese, people look on from Malta and think that the British have kind of made a bit of a fool of themselves. Whereas I personally look on from Malta, where we have the disintegration of the rule of law, very little signs of democracy to be had. And I look on and I say, okay, there may be big flaws in the British system, etc., but you have the systems in place to prevent somebody like Boris Johnson, behaving like a dictator and behaving like a tyrant. So from my point of view, from where I'm sitting in a country which has no laws, hardly any laws existing whatsoever, I look on and say, well, good, well done.
Okay.
Systems are in place.
Sorry, I believe Ian Blackford is just about to speak in Westminster, so I think we might be...
The right honourable gentleman leads the third party in this House. He has a right to be heard. He will continue his contribution, and he will...
We are just looking... Sorry about that. We are just looking to see where we are with that. I think he may be about to get back up, but we'll have a look. So, anyway, as we were saying there, sorry, Lizzie. Oh, he is back on his feet now, so I think...
Brexit crisis, but for the constitutional future of these islands and indeed the future of our democracy. We have a Prime Minister standing here in Parliament that he sought to silence. People across these countries will be reading today about how the Prime Minister fought the law, but the law won. The Prime Minister, the head of government, who is responsible for the law, responsible for governance. What an example to the public. Let me be clear to the Prime Minister that he should resign. But if he fails to do so, yes, the opposition must unite to trigger a vote of no confidence to bring this chaotic government down. By triggering a vote of no confidence, we will ensure that the Benn Act is honoured to take no deal off the table by allowing the opposition to instil an interim leader to take back control and to protect our economy from the cliff edge. Mr Speaker, the Scottish National Party fully supports stopping no deal. It is our priority. But let me be clear to members on these benches, we are not powerless. Doing nothing is not an option. This is the time for leadership. Once we have removed the Prime Minister, removed the threat of no deal, the people must have their say through a general election as quickly as is possible. We must unstick this mess, and we must trust the people to make their choice. We cannot trust this Prime Minister. His time must be up. His days of lying, of cheating, and of undermining the rule of law must be numbered. So I
Order. Just for the avoidance of doubt, I'm sure the right honourable gentleman will not state in this House that the Prime Minister has lied in the House. He must not do so. Order. That is the order. That is the procedural position. He didn't say that, but he did refer to lying, and I know he cannot be referring to it in the context of the exchanges in this House. And a nod of the head to confirm that my interpretation is correct will suffice, and he can then proceed with the rest of his questioning. I'm correct in my surmise, I'm sure.
Indeed, Mr. Speaker. So I have one question to the Prime Minister for now. Do the right thing and do it now. Prime Minister, end this dictatorship. Will you now resign?
Well, fairly unsurprising there from Ian Blackford. Very, very strong words there as he called for the Prime Minister to resign immediately and to then hold a general election as soon as possible after a no deal has been assured. And Lizzie, as you said, we will get on to talking about a story that you've been looking into for us in Malta very shortly that kind of highlights what you were saying about the lack of a rule of law there. How do you think it looks? I mean, looking at Scotland, obviously this is where you're from originally. When you see the Prime Minister being taken to court and found to have broken the law in basically trying to suspend Parliament, does that give you confidence about how Britain is being run? The fact that the courts are able to step in and rein in a Prime Minister like that?
Definitely. I mean, as I said, I'm sitting looking at it from Malta, where I've lived for nearly 12 years. And since, over the past 6 years, we've had the dismantling of any kind of independent judicial system. I mean, I look at what's happened there and I say, wow, brilliant. Boris Johnson and all the heavyweights he has around him, Dominic Cummings and so on, Aaron Banks, all of these people who are heavyweight, mega rich people who think that they can just push their money around and get what they want, and they haven't. And the problem we have in Malta is that there is no one there like the Supreme Court to step in and stop what's going on here. What we have is Europe. We have the Council of Europe, the European Parliament, the Venice Commission and so on. But there's nothing inside Malta to prevent what is going on here, which is basically a populist dictatorship. The people who are I talk about this in the report, but the people who are in place as judges and magistrates are predominantly appointed by the Prime Minister himself. So there's nobody to stop the Prime Minister doing whatever he wants, because the system is geared towards preventing that and supporting whatever he does. And that's the frightening thing. So in comparison, the UK looks fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we have, of course, seen the media get quite animated about these judges, talking about enemies of the people and things like that. We've seen politicians using similar sorts of language as well. Does that worry you? Do you see Britain kind of going down the path towards somewhere more like how you described Malta just now?
Well, it's also very similar to Trump. I mean, he's already shouting out about it being a witch hunt, the attempt to impeach him. And this kind of language is very familiar in Malta, the language of witches. That was the label given to Daphne Caruana Galizia was a witch. She was labelled a witch. Anybody who criticises this government is called a traitor. I mean, we as activists and critics of the government are traitors. and we are trying to, we are trying to undermine and cast a bad light on the fantastic reputation of Malta. That's what we are doing, apparently. I mean, it's quite surreal. I hope anyway that this starts by saying, and having it decided by the Supreme Court that Boris Johnson has broken the law is a good start. That enables it not to go down the Trump route, enables it not to go down where we are, where we are now in Malta, which is not a place anybody wants to be. So I see it as a very optimistic sign. Well, it doesn't mean to say that the road is smooth from now on in,
No.
but it's certainly a light in the darkness.
It's interesting to hear that from you. A lot of us here, I think, have been becoming increasingly pessimistic, but it is worth remembering, I suppose, that there are a lot of ways that things could be significantly worse. On that note, I think we will just go straight on to have a look at the story that you are discussing. This is about Daphne Caruana Galizia, a journalist in Malta for several decades, one of the leading investigative journalists in the country, and she was killed 2 years ago now. You produced a video for us, so I think we're going to just look at that first, and then we'll have a bit of a chat about it. So we'll just bring that video up now.
Daphne Caruana Galizia was Malta's most important investigative journalist. She exposed chronic and multiple forms of corruption running right across this country and beyond, and still happening today as we speak. Daphne was once described as a one-woman WikiLeaks. She wrote prolifically. Thousands of people read her blog on a daily basis. One of the stories she wrote concerns Malta's dangerous and dubious cash for passport scheme. Basically, if you have enough money, you can buy a Maltese passport, get Maltese citizenship, and you have a free gateway into the European Union on top. It doesn't matter if you're a Russian mafia or a Chinese billionaire money launderer. As long as you have the cash, you're welcome. And we're not talking cheap. It's €650,000 bottom line. People have been arrested in the US and the UK on massive counts of fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, and these people have been carrying Maltese passports. But no responsibility has been taken here in Malta by the people who sold them to them. Another story that Daphne broke involves a power station set up by this government in partnership with the tyrannical ruling family of Azerbaijan. Strong evidence suggests that this whole enterprise was created specifically so that politicians and people in politically exposed positions could stand to make millions of euros in the form of kickbacks and bribes. Secret offshore Panama accounts were set up, presumably with the intention of stashing away the dirty cash. In 2016, the Panama Papers made world headlines, and two of the names in it are Maltese. One is the Minister for Tourism, Conrad Mitzi, and the other, Pete Shekemble, is the Prime Minister's right-hand man. Both men remain in positions of political power. Malta is the only country in Europe which has a sitting minister named in the Panama Papers. Everywhere else, there were resignations and recriminations. In Malta, nothing. On Monday, the 16th of October, 2017, in the middle of the afternoon, Daphne was assassinated in a huge car bomb, just minutes from her home. Her oldest son, Matthew, himself a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, found the remains of her body in the burning wreckage of her car. Something so horrific, so brutal, so appalling. You'd imagine it would have sent shockwaves right across this tiny island where everybody knows each other. But, for the main part, it didn't. And the reaction to her murder was almost as shocking as the assassination itself. Many people said she deserved it. Some, and people in positions of authority, publicly celebrated her death. It was and is barbaric. For 3 decades, Daphne was exposed to a sustained and coordinated hate campaign mounted against her by the political parties that are now in government. She was labelled a witch. An attempt was made to set fire to her home while she was inside with her family sleeping. She had a pet dog whose throat was slit. Big billboards with pictures of Daphne's face were plastered right across Malta so people could recognise her and attack her in the street if they saw fit. And they did. Malta is a European country, and this behaviour is medieval. And it's backed up and supported by a powerful propaganda machine. In Malta, the majority of the media are owned and controlled by the government. Since Daphne's assassination, from the European Parliament, the European Commission, the Council of Europe, the Venice Commission, Moneyval, Greco. Just the other week, Malta failed an expert review of its anti-money laundering and anti-terrorism regimes. Malta has been told that it is not a functioning democracy. Malta has been told that it must completely overhaul its judicial system, because at the moment, judges and magistrates are appointed and promoted on the basis of their loyalty to this government. The rule of law in Malta has been decimated, if not completely destroyed. Just behind me here are the law courts. When Daphne was assassinated, she had 47 libel suits pending against her, most of these from politicians, including the Prime Minister. None of these people, all of whom might have had some motive for wanting Daphne dead, have been interviewed, let alone arrested by the police. Opposite the law courts is an ongoing protest demanding justice for Daphne, an end to impunity, and insisting that those who ordered Daphne's assassination be brought to justice. Every day, activists and members of the public place flowers, candles and posters here. Every night, sometimes more often, in the morning too at the moment, these flowers, candles and posters are removed on direct orders of this government. In June this year, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe passed a resolution giving Malta 3 months to begin an independent public inquiry. Throughout this period, the government has remained mainly silent or contradicted itself or given out transparently false reasons as to why it will not comply. With barely 6 days to go until the deadline, the Prime Minister suddenly announced that he had chosen the 3 men to lead the inquiry. Immediately, questions were raised as to the integrity of his choice. All 3 men claimed to have clear links to the government, so their independence and impartiality is being called into question. So matters are far from resolved, and the controversy continues. Shortly after Daphne's assassination, the Prime Minister, Joseph Muscat, claimed he would leave no stone unturned in the hunt for Daphne's killers. Nearly 2 years on, and this government has done everything possible to make sure that the people who ordered her assassination remain protected. And you have to ask yourselves why. Well, that question will be answered through the independent public inquiry, which this government is doing everything in its power to prevent.
So thank you for that, Lizzie. I mean, it's a fairly incredible story, and one that I confess I hadn't heard much about until we decided to cover it on the show here. So it's just under 2 years ago since Daphne was murdered. How did you kind of get to know about the case and take an interest in it?
Well, Daphne Caruana Galizia was very well known in Malta, for a long, long time before she was assassinated. On the day of the assassination itself, and I remember it clearly, I was at work and I was teaching, and I actually work with a relative of Daphne's, and we've been talking and laughing at lunchtime. And later that afternoon, another colleague came out and told me, you know, have you heard they've got Daphne? And everybody knew who Daphne was. You didn't need her, you didn't need any other names. Everybody knew who she was. And it was just quite unbelievable. I mean, as I say in the video, it's a very small island. Everybody knows each other. So there's no protection from it, and there's no getting away from any of this. And the reaction to her assassination was something I've never experienced before, which was she deserved it, or she said nasty things about people. And you think, suddenly, having lived in a country, then I've lived here since 2008, so I'd lived then for 10 years, whatever. Suddenly you're confronted by a country which you always knew was corrupt. That wasn't really, it was more the mentality. It was the idea that people some of whom I knew, I mean, I've lost some friends through this, said things that you just thought, you cannot say these things are not human. You cannot say anything other than this is horrific. Her assassination was horrific. There's no other way. You can't have a but. In Malta, there were many buts. One of the things people said was, oh, it was terrible, she was assassinated, but I didn't agree with everything she said. And you think, no, hang on a minute, this is completely irrelevant. So it was like what happened after the assassination. There was a very big protest in Valletta, the biggest one that has ever been, as far as I'm aware. I naively thought things would continue like that. We had more protests, more demonstrations, and the people got less and less. And there's a reason for that, and the reason for that is that everything is connected in Malta. So if I work for the government, and this is true to an extent and also an excuse to another extent. If I work, for the government, and I show my face on the streets, then I run the risk of losing my job. So you have a culture of fear, a culture of omerta, no one says anything. And because that exists, nothing changes. Mm-hmm. So no one speaks and no one protests. All the normal things that you think would happen don't happen. And some of those reasons I kind of understand. I think they're wrong, I mean, I come from a country, I come from Scotland, where you protest, you just get out there and you say it's wrong. And Malta is not like that. I mean, there's been times when, you have to push people to get out on the streets, and they still don't come, and you think, what does it take? Really, what does it take? There are scandals every day, several times a day in the paper, about what this government is doing. Business as usual.
Yeah. So you've said obviously that there was a great deal of people saying some of these terrible things, why, kind of equivocating about whether this was a bad thing or not. But we noticed in your film, it does seem like there have been some protests, and it does seem like there is an undercurrent of people who are very unhappy about what happened with this case. So where would you say public opinion is? Would you say it's more with supporters of Daphne and her family, or would you say that public opinion is more kind of towards the government and against her?
Well, it's not maybe as clear-cut as being against or for Daphne, although that is part of it, and it's kind of made into that. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I would still say the majority of people support this government. I can liken it to, I can liken the situation here to, and I have done before, to Northern Ireland sectarianism, where you are born, the party in government in Malta is called the Labour Party. And I laugh when I say it because it has no correlation to anything I would know under that name, whether for good or bad. And what you have in Malta is tribalism and deep-rooted partisanship. So I am born Labour, literally. I am baptised Labour, and I support this government. No question about policies or ideology, because personally speaking, I don't really know what their policies or ideologies are. You know, they're deeply corrupt, and that's without question. But in terms of what their actual policies are, I wouldn't really know, because that's not discussed. It's just, I am Labour, I was born Labour, I married Labour, and I support them. Having said that, there are things going on now, particularly with the construction industry. I mean, we have cranes everywhere. You know, I took photos yesterday. I walked outside my front door. The guys are on the street. There's dust everywhere. I walk to work. It's about 30 minutes beside the beautiful sea, where all, you know, just cranes and cranes and cranes. Houses have been collapsing. In fact, a woman died recently. Her home collapsed. The whole block of apartments collapsed. Two collapsed, I think on the same day, if I remember rightly, or within days of each other. She was in hospital when she died. She was an older woman, but she died in hospital away from her home. Things like this, and cutting down trees. This government just cuts down trees as if they are enemies of the people, and we hardly have any trees in Malta. So these kind of issues affect people. We've got the highest rates of asthma, the highest rates of CO2, the highest rates of pollution in the European Union, in Europe. And these things affect people, and it's only when people get impacted on a personal level that it seems to motivate people into taking a stand. And even then it's difficult. You know, it's only when my house falls down, basically, that I begin to care. And that sounds a bit brutal, but it's fairly honest. I mean, there was a French documentary was broadcast on Sunday. You're asking about, you know, public opinion in relation to Daphne Caruana Galizia in particular. I'm part of a women's-led organisation called Occupy Justice. We've been going, we're a pressure group, not an organised group as such, but we've been together pushing for justice for Daphne, pushing for an end to this impunity since the assassination. And we're largely responsible for, well, we are responsible for keeping the flowers and the candles and the posters there at the protest memorial site that you saw in the video. Now, the French TV reporters who broadcast their program last Sunday filmed, and it just was by chance that they were there when this happened. They filmed the three sisters, Daphne's three sisters, who were placing posters and flowers and candles at the site that you saw in the video. During this, three older men arrived, attacked them, shouted at them. Daphne's younger sister, one man grabbed a framed photo of Daphne and threw it at Daphne's younger sister, and it hit her in the chest. And they just tried to, you know, destroy the protest memorial. This is recent, and this happens all the time. You know, as I said in my video, the flowers and the candles and the posters are removed every single night on orders of the government. And then you have the passers-by who just come and taunt and shout. I mean, this is normality in Malta. So I think, in answer to your question, are more people supportive towards, you know, trying to get rid of to try and get rid of a very corrupt government, a very corrupt system. I mean, the whole system is corrupt. The whole country is deeply problematic. Trying to get people to see this is really difficult. And what we have at the minute too is no opposition party, which could be a good thing, because you could say, okay, here's a point and a crisis in Malta's history. It's been a republic since 1964, and it's hit crisis point, and it hits crisis point every day on a daily basis. It couldn't be more critical here. I mean, it just is. Okay. And it gets worse every day. So you could see it as a good thing and say, okay, let's look at different ways to try and organise a society which is not about Parliament, because it doesn't work here. Parliament here is just corrupt. But unfortunately, at the minute, it's still the parliamentary system, and there's no opposition party. So we're a bit...
Sorry, so this inquiry that has been set up, these three names were just put forward by this for this public inquiry. This had to be done. I think there was a deadline tomorrow for this to happen. Now, what is the resistance that the family has to this, to these people who have been named to this inquiry team? Why is it that they're resistant? Because obviously there's been a big push for this public inquiry ever since the original incident. Why has that taken so long? And now what is the question mark over the membership of that panel?
Okay, why has the public inquiry taken so long? Because the government has refused to do it. It was only in June, the end of June, that the Council of Europe passed a resolution, again resisted by this government, which was passed by an overwhelming majority. And one of the things it said was you must have a public inquiry, an independent public inquiry, and the deadline is 3 months. Exactly as you say, tomorrow is the deadline, the 26th of September. Immediately, the draft report of the resolution was published by the Special Rapporteur, Peter Omtzigt. The government produced a press release which was Orwellian. You know, it was quite incredible. Talking about it as if it was some insidious attempt to undermine again Malta and, you know, undermine Malta's reputation in Europe. Malta's reputation in Europe couldn't be worse. Well, it could be, because probably tomorrow it will be. But anyway, so the reason that it hasn't happened is because this government has blocked it the whole way through. So the resolution was passed by part in June by an overwhelming majority, and the government at first said we're going to take legal advice. And you think, well, legal advice from whom? This is the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Who are you taking legal advice from? Then a strange thing happened where the Foreign Secretary was in London at a meeting with media freedom NGOs, and one of the women, Sarah Clark, who used to work for PEN International, now for Article 19, she cornered the Foreign Secretary and said, what are you doing? When are you starting the public inquiry? You've been given 3 months. And he said, yes, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it within 3 months. So all the NGOs, all the activists, etc., put out the information, Malta government is going to do it in 3 months. Malta government then said, oh, that's what we said, but they hadn't said it. And then, of course, they reneged, and then they were silent. So when they made the announcement last Friday, it was quite a shock and quite a surprise. More shocking was the names of the 3 people they had chosen, because they're supposed to be independent and impartial. And it's supposed to be nothing to do with the Malta government, the Malta police, the Malta judiciary, nothing, you know. So the 3 names, one of them is already or was already involved in the criminal trial. So one of the things the government said in its excuses as to why it wasn't going to have the public inquiry, it said we don't want it to interfere with our ongoing criminal investigations, because they've arrested 3 guys, low-life criminals, who are still awaiting trial, who may have detonated the bomb but did not order the assassination. That's pretty clear. So they kept using the excuse, you know, we don't want the public inquiry to interfere with our ongoing criminal investigations, even though they were told categorically it wouldn't. But one of the people that they've chosen for the board was involved in these criminal investigations. So already you have a contradiction. You know, if you have somebody that's involved in both, then you're contradicting your own statement, or the government's own statement that you didn't want interference. Another guy is a lawyer, and he is representing a guy called Adrian Hillman. Adrian Hillman is named in the Council of Europe report. He is under criminal investigation for massive money laundering, involving as well the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, a guy called Keisha Kembley, mentioned in the video. You cannot have a man who represents, you know, a lawyer who represents somebody who's under criminal investigations for things that Daphne Caruana Galizia has self-exposed in her writing, conducting an independent and impartial inquiry into the same journalist assassination.
Yeah, that does seem kind of extraordinary. So is your suspicion that the goal was to create a panel that nobody was really going to be happy with, and basically say, oh well, we'll just forget about it then? Or do you think the goal was to produce a public inquiry that would produce the result, the answers that the government wanted to give?
I think the intention would be the latter. We had this already, we had a test run for this last year. One of the things that Daphne wrote about, which was a big case in the months leading up to her assassination, was a thing called e-grant, where she said that there was a Panama account opened in the name of the Prime Minister's wife, and this account was called e-grant. And shortly after she published this information, the Prime Minister called a snap election. This was in 2017, in June. So he always said, oh, you know, it's absolute lies, scurrilous, etc. So they have a snap election in June 2017. Daphne was assassinated in October 2017. The Prime Minister sets up an inquiry into the e-grant affair. He sets it up with his terms of reference. He appoints his magistrate, who he has subsequently promoted to a judge. Okay, and he sets up this inquiry to prove that he didn't own e-grant and his wife didn't own e-grant. Now, we know there's somebody in Malta that works for another company, the Prime Minister's accountants, called Nextia BT, who knows who owns e-grant. So the simple thing would be to ask him, because he apparently gave the name so confidential that it had to be done on a Skype call. But nobody's decided to go and ask him. Instead, he had this huge inquiry, which of course exonerated him, which was not set up to find out who owned e-grant, simply set up to find out that he didn't and his wife didn't. We had crying on the TV about how sad and how awful it had been for his family. We had the Prime Minister's wife crying. I mean, it was a farce. So yes, I think his intention was he would set up a public inquiry that would obviously clear everybody and everything would be normal. But the trouble is, there's a kind of a mismatch goes on. We have a government who plays to the home crowd here in Malta, and we have the much bigger world of Europe and the international world. And you can't get away with that, with the home crowd behaviour. Here we go, we set up an inquiry, here's these three people, what's your problem? You can't get away with that when you're dealing with the Council of Europe and the international world generally. So I don't know what will happen next. I think there's a meeting on the 30th of September, but there is no chance in any kind of sane or rational world that these three people will be accepted to lead this inquiry.
Yeah. So you mentioned there the involvement of the Council of Europe, and I was surprised when I looked into this just how strongly Europe had spoken on this. We know that the EU bodies tend not to want to get involved in any sort of internal politics in any of the member states. But there have been some quite strongly worded statements come out, and this kind of pressure to have the inquiry. What's your feeling about that? Do you feel that they've done everything they could to help? Is there something more you would like the international community to do?
I've always said we needed external help. Okay, it's quite clear that the change that's needed in this country will not come from within this country. That's been clear from the start. So we need as much help as we can possibly get. I'm also aware of the limitations of European bodies. I'm also aware and pleased of the amount of pressure that they put on Malta, because we need all the help we can get. We need it from outside. I mean, I'm aware too, they've got other cases on their hand. They've got Hungary and Poland, but they've also got Slovakia. Now, in Slovakia, people resigned, whether they did that, for whatever the real reasons for why they did it, they resigned. Whereas here, nothing has changed, nothing. The people who are accused and have been exposed in the Panama Papers, we have a Minister for the Economy, a guy called Chris Cardona, who was friends and drinking buddies with two of the people accused, accused of assassinating Daphne Caruana Galizia. The Minister for the Economy is drinking buddies and has legal pass with two of the people of the suspected assassination people, about to go on trial. So it's utterly bizarre, because in a normal country, this just would not be the case. Malta is so far from being a normal country. I mean, nothing has moved, nothing has changed, no resignation, nothing.
Yeah, it is a pretty incredible story. It's not what you expect to hear from a modern EU country. Just finally on this then, what's your hope for the immediate future with this public investigation and all the kind of surrounding issues? What's your hope is on for what happens next?
Well, my kind of main hope is that the Council of Europe reject these three people. They reject the panel that the Prime Minister has chosen. That's my main hope. I mean, I think what the Council of Europe were doing, because they're well aware of Malta government's complicity, for want of a better word, in the assassination. That's clear. That's clear in the report that they've made. That I think what they're doing is they played quite a clever game. It is a bit like asking people who, I'm saying this carefully because, but people who may have some idea of who assassinated Daphne. Let's put it that way. It's like putting those people in charge of running an independent, not running, but putting together an independent and impartial inquiry into discovering who these people are. It's like getting insiders it's like getting the corrupt to try and investigate themselves.
Yeah.
People have said if this government was a genuine government, which it may have been voted in, blah blah blah. If it was a government that was genuine in wanting to find out who ordered Daphne Caruana Galizia's assassination, if they genuinely wanted this, then they would have appointed independent people. They would have appointed people from, I don't know, Amnesty International or NGOs or the UN, whatever. If they were taking this seriously, that's what they would have done, and they haven't.
Sure.
I think what they've done is they kind of proved themselves in the eyes of the Council of Europe, what the Council of Europe would have already have known.
Yeah. Well, Lizzie, thank you so much for being here. This is a shocking story, and I'm sure many of our viewers will be fascinated to have heard about it. And I do hope that you will come back again and talk to us a little bit more. Unfortunately, we do have to move on. We've only got so much time, and we do have a couple of other stories we want to talk about. But I really do hope you can come back and talk to us about that again. Mm-hmm. But to move on, we have heard yesterday that the American Congress, or the House of Representatives, under Speaker Nancy Pelosi, will begin impeachment proceedings against President Donald Trump. There has been an ongoing pressure to begin impeachment proceedings for various of Donald Trump's potential crimes, alleged crimes and misdemeanors, everything from collusion with Russia during the election to obstruction of justice on the investigation into Russia to violations of the Emoluments Clause. But this latest one was one that Trump seemed to actually bring on himself, as he is said to have asked Ukraine's president in a phone call in July to investigate whether Joe Biden, the former vice president who is running to become the Democratic nominee to face Trump next year, if Biden had shut down an investigation into a gas company in Ukraine that employs his son. This is quite a big move. This is only the third president in history ever to face impeachment proceedings. The fourth. Nixon was never actually impeached, though he resigned before he had the chance. So what do you make of this? Another, apparently quite corrupt leader in a country that seems to have a lot of difficulty in investigating him. What do you make of this incident, Lizzie?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was still on. Oh,
sorry. We were talking about the Trump impeachment over this potential or alleged collaboration with Ukraine to try and damage Joe Biden. I was just saying that it's another country where the leader is apparently acting out with the law, and it's taken a long time for Congress to start being able to investigate him. What do you make of this? And as you said, this number of countries all over the place where the rule of law seems to be weakening on leaders. What's your feeling about the States just now?
Well, for me, it's been a fascinating week because, you have Boris Johnson, which is great news. You have Trump being threatened, which is great news. You have our own government being exposed, for their crooked, grotty, horrible cash for passports deals on French TV. So it's been quite a fascinating and optimistic week so far. I mean, with Donald Trump, you kind of think, what does the man have to do to get impeached?
Yeah, well, there are 6 committees now in the House of Representatives that were all already carrying out investigations into different crimes or ethical violations, I think we should probably say, that he may have committed. But they are now adding this issue of the Ukraine case to that, and they are proceeding with formal impeachment proceedings. It still looks likely to fail in the Senate, but I think the hope is that by just laying out everything that he's alleged to have done, getting all the evidence in place, it does seem that Congress is hoping to just weaken him, show the American people just how bad things have been. What do you think? I mean, just to draw another little comparison with Malta, does everybody in Malta know how corrupt the government is, or is it like you say, that partisan thing where people won't criticize, people won't accept that their side is a problem?
Okay, there are. For example, I had a plumber come out the other day, and he was just a nice little ordinary Maltese man, working man, nice guy, and he asked me stuff about Malta, and when I talked about corruption, he spoke about, but they need to do this and they need to do that and they need to be building these towers. And I was saying, but these towers are not for people's homes, these towers are for big businesses, and these towers are given out on dirty permits, blah, blah, blah. So you have the kind of little, I don't know how to describe it, just a kind of normal working guy who just watches government TV. And you are talking government TV. I mean, it's propaganda, massive propaganda. Mm-hmm. Then you have people who I get very angry with, because these are people who are educated and who do know or should know, who still don't know as much as I think they should. I think people need to take responsibility for finding out what's going on. But in actual fact, you can just step outside in the street. The skyline is dominated by cranes, dominated by towers going up. So I think it's either a case of people are just going home and watching government TV, which quite a large section of the population are, and then the people I would blame a little more, who are the people who should know, who should know better, because they have a choice in terms of what TV they watch or what papers they read or what information they look for. And then there are the ones who, the die-hard Labour Party supporters who watch the government TV who would die for this party.
Yeah.
Well, as I say, I compare this, and as many people have, with the situation before the Second World War, and I look at what's going on in terms of, trying to make sure that people like Trump, for all the terrible things that he's done and is doing, for people like Boris Johnson, for all the terrible things he's done and is doing, but there are still measures in place. This gives me hope, actually. Mm-hmm. However slow and however frustrating it is, the fact that these things are happening at all gives me hope.
Yeah, that is a good point. That at least we do still have some sort of functioning way to hold these people to account. Just moving on now again, new legislation from the Scottish Government is said to demonstrate great global leadership on climate change. This new climate change bill, which will be voted on in the Scottish Parliament later on, will be landmark legislation committing Scotland to becoming a net zero society by 2045, which is 5 years before the rest of the UK is expected to, and that is in line with the advice from the government's independent expert advisors, the UK Committee on Climate Change. The Scottish Government will also respond to the global climate emergency by adopting an ambitious new target to reduce emissions by 75% by 2030, the toughest statutory target of any country in the world for this date, going above and beyond what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said is required worldwide to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. So what's your feeling about Scotland trying to take a global lead on climate change then, Lizzie?
Brilliant. And it kind of makes me laugh because I remember Donald Trump going on about, wind farms, and they make a mess of his beloved country. So I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm proud of what Scotland does in terms of environmental stuff. As I say, it's not perfect. No, it is. But at least we're making that effort.
Yeah, we did get a response from the Green Party, who said that in certain areas it didn't go far enough, particularly in relation to reforestation. And I do like that we have the Greens able to push the SNP in the right direction on some of these issues. Always just trying to make them be a little bit more radical, work a little bit harder. So that is but it does seem like good news. I always, as you say, like to see Scotland taking a lead on any issue that where we can be a leader. And just finally, a very quick story. This is from the R.U. Wiggins Aberdeen paper mill. This is a historic paper mill at Stonywood in Aberdeen. And the Minister for Business, Fair Work and Skills, Jamie Hepburn, said, "I'm delighted the future of this historic mill has now been secured through a management buyout. This is great news for the employees and their families, and indeed welcomed across Aberdeen, the North East and further afield. The Scottish Government, through Scottish Enterprise, has been working intensively with the administrator, management team, Unite and local partners throughout the entire process to secure this positive outcome. The priority now is to work closely with the new owners to realise their plans for the long-term success of the business and identify future opportunities in the sector which ultimately benefits the local economy and the wider North East economy." So another a historic business in Aberdeen, and just really good to see the Scottish Government stepping in where possible to help out. So that does bring us, unfortunately, to the end of the show, Lizzie. I'm sorry we didn't get more time to talk about all of these issues with you. I do hope, as the Daphne Caruana Galizia case progresses, that you will come back and talk to us more about it.
Certainly will. And thank you very much for having me on the show. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. And thank you as well for watching. As you know, as we tell you every night, it is an expensive business making TV programs, so if you're able to, we would be delighted for you to sign up. At the address on the bottom of your screen, become a Broadcasting Scotland supporter at broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Your £5 a month can make all the difference to producing more and better quality programs for you. We are, as you probably know, we are trying to get a new Scottish Question Time show touring the country every week to talk to politicians and other people to get answers to the big questions that we all have. If you would like to see that, we need another 300 new subscribers in order to make that happen. We are ready to go as soon as we get those. I'm just being told in my ear that it is under 300 now because we have had a number of new subscribers in the last week or so. But we always need more. So if you are able to afford it, do please go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register and sign up there. If you're not, don't worry, the shows will always be free to view, but every penny does count, so if you are able to help, please do. In the meantime, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you again to Lizzie for being with us, and we will be back tomorrow with another Scotland at 7. Thank you and good night.